The guy to the side of me is a big deal. Adam Zagoria. Follow him on Twitter at Adam Zagoria. He's on Forbes, New York Times, other publications. Also, check out his zagsblog.com. Lots of basketball, lots of tennis stuff to peruse. He is a stud when it comes to sports media. I'm Bryan Fenley. I am an anchor for Fox Sports Radio. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. So last time I had you on, Adam, we were talking a lot of hoops.
Yeah.
There is a humongous tennis tournament taking place right now in Flushing Meadows, and Serena Williams, at almost 39 years old, says she is enjoying playing without the crowds, which is a unique response. How do you think, Adam, as I welcome you in, the absence of fans could lend itself to more upsets than maybe usual?
Yeah. Hey, Bryan. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's definitely weird. I mean, I've covered the U.S. Open, every year for the last 15 or 16 years. And it's just, really weird that there's no fans and, most people are just watching the matches on TV and not going out to the stadium. So there's more room for the players to walk around. And I think it's kind of more fun for the players because they can sort of have free reign of the tennis center, the Billie Jean King Tennis Center. You see some of them sitting around in Arthur Ashe Stadium in their suites watching the other matches, and they're not bothered by any fans. As far as Serena, look, she's trying to make history still here. She's at 23 Grand Slam titles. Excuse me. She's trying to get that 24th to tie Margaret Court, and she did say after her second round win that she sort of finds it more calming, that there's no fans in the stadium. So for her, I guess it's maybe a good thing. She's going to play Sloane Stephens, a fellow American, in the next round. And Sloane said the match won't be as lit, won't be as exciting as it would be if there were fans there. I mean, Serena generally gets a good amount of crowd support. So at those key moments in the match, when she's maybe down or facing a break point, she doesn't have that crowd support now. So, we'll say she's going to if she's going to win this thing, she's going to really be tested because she has Sloane Stephens. Then she could play Victoria Azarenka after that. Both of them are Grand Slam champions.
If you were to assign a probability for Williams to win this thing outright, what would you think of as far as a number?
I don't know. I'd say maybe like 40%. I mean, look, in any given match, I think Serena is the favorite. You point out she's going to be 39 later this month. She's a mom. But, I think her movement is not great. A lot of people have pointed that out. And people like John McEnroe and Chrissy Everett have said that, the other players just don't fear her the way they did, when she was so dominant. That said, in any given match, she can win any given match. But in a Grand Slam, Bryan, as you know, you have to win 7 matches in 2 weeks. And the good news for her, she's come through her first 2 matches in straight sets. She hasn't had to go 3 sets. Her 5 matches before this and other events all went 3 sets. So she's going to need to pile up some quick wins.
One of the notable things about that second round win, yeah, you said it was in straight sets, but one thing that could be a little alarming is she had her serve broken 3 times. So if you look at it as you go deeper in the draw, perhaps that provides some more issues, but hopefully not for Serena's sake and certainly our sake as we root her on amongst all the other competitors in this tourney. How about other American women that are catching your eye, Adam, that are still alive in this draw and that might have a realistic shot at making a run at the trophy?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, as we speak right now, Bryan, there are 11 American women into the 3rd round, which is, great signs for American tennis. You have Sophia Kenin, the number 2 seed who won the Australian Open. Her parents are of Russian origin, but she's an American. She grew up in Florida. She's the number 2 seed. She's got as good a chance as anybody. You have Amanda Anisimova, who won her match yesterday against 16-year-old Katrina Scott, another American. She's a factor. Then you have Jen Brady, who won the event in Lexington, Kentucky, leading into the U.S. Open. She's a little different. She played college tennis at UCLA, where Stella Sampras, who's Pete Sampras' sister, is the coach.
Yeah.
So some of these other players are, phenoms as teenagers. Kenin, Anisimova, Jen Brady went to college and got some experience in college. You still have Madison Keys still in the draw. So it's a great sign for, American women's tennis. Obviously, the American men are not doing as well as the women.
Well, one of the American men who is performing pretty well is Francis Tiafoe. Here he goes into the third round, and he beat Millman. And look, Tiafoe said he obviously feeds off the crowd, and so there's that development and that added element of like you don't have that as a lot of these players. I even look at like Coco Gauff, and perhaps she would have won her match earlier if she had the crowd behind her. There's such a power to
Yeah.
being in a match and you have the crowd rooting you on. How plausible is it, do you think, Adam, for, say, a 22-year-old Tiafoe to break through? Because I know he's been waiting for this moment.
Yeah, that was a big win for him. I think he won in 5 sets, and he's into the third round of the U.S. Open for the first time. I think he had lost in the second round the last 2 years and in the first round the years before that. So that's definitely a good sign. I mean, it was a little weird in the first round. He had all the big serving American men, John Isner, Riley Opelka, who's a little injured, Sam Querrey, all lost in the first round, the big serving American men. Isner could have moved on to play Novak Djokovic in the 16s, and that could have been a little bit of a threat for Novak. So, seeing all those guys go out early, I think was a little surprising. It's a big match today. Taylor Fritz, I believe, is playing to play Tsitsipas, right?
So Fritz is what? He's the 19th. Did I see he's the 19th seed?
Yeah, I think he's 18 or 19.
18.
Let's see here. He's playing Tiafoe's in it. JJ Wolf's an American is in it. So you still have some American men. I mean, obviously Novak is the is a huge favorite, among the men, and I think it'll take a colossal surprise for Novak not to win it.
Former number one Andy Murray.
Fritz plays. I said he played. Taylor Fritz plays Shapovalov.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Shapovalov's one of the 3 Canadian guys still in it. So big week for Canada. They get Steve Nash as the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, and they got 3 guys in Shapovalov, FAA, Felix Auger-Aliassime, and Vasek Pospisil all into the third round.
Well, let's go right to FAA because he took down Andy Murray. It was nice to see Andy Murray out there, and he won his first round in 5 sets in a match that I think went over 4 hours, like 4.5 hours. And then FAA smokes Murray in straight sets. And I know that, Adam, Felix has had issues performing in majors and having some sort of longevity through these tournaments. His win against Murray, was it more of an example of taking advantage of a fatigued Murray, or are you starting to believe in the FAA hype and that he can finally make a long run in a Grand Slam?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think both of those things are true. I mean, look, he's only 20 years old, but this is, got to be, the biggest win of his career. Certainly in a major tournament, you're beating a 3-time Grand Slam champion, former world number 1 in Andy Murray, and not just beating him, but, really kind of humbling him. I think he had like 52 winners and 20-something aces. I mean, obviously, Andy was compromised. He played almost 5 hours in his first round match against Nishioka, the Japanese, coming back from 2 sets down. And, Andy was kind of hobbling around the practice courts on Wednesday. So, that's a lot to ask for him to, he had a hip replacement in 2019, and he's still working his way back. So, I think FAA just sort of, kind of put him out of his misery there.
Yeah.
But the 2 storylines that came out of that are Andy says he's going to keep going and keep trying to play Grand Slam tournaments, which I think is good for tennis. I mean, he's a known entity, and if he can get back to going deep into the second week of a major, that's great for tennis. A guy with a titanium hip. And then just from the Canadian perspective and the FAA perspective, that's it's a big time win for him. And like we said, there's 3 Canadians into the into the third round. So, it's sort of a Canada-U.S. Arms race there, where the Canadian young guys are ahead of our guys a little bit right now.
A border war for sure. What do you make about the conclusions around the faster court services, and some players enjoy this and it aligns with their games, and others are complaining? So how are you stomaching the feedback that the court surfaces are presenting to these players in this tournament?
Yeah, I think the general consensus seems to be that the 2 show courts, Ash and Armstrong, are a little slower than the outer courts, and the outer courts are a little faster. But one thing to keep in mind here, just in general, is most of these players haven't played that much this year. I mean, look, there was a pandemic. Nobody played for several months. A guy like Andy Murray probably could have used some warm-up matches and some more tournaments coming into this to get back in match play shape. Even somebody like Serena really hasn't played that many matches coming in. So the people who got to play in World Team Tennis, like a Jen Brady, even Kim Clijsters played a bunch of World Team Tennis matches and some exhibitions. You would think that would help them. You would think the people are going to do well in this tournament are people who got to play some, bunch of matches in recent months and weeks. I mean, even Novak, whose Adria tour kind of blew up on him in Europe there with a bunch of people getting COVID, even he got some matches in Serbia and Croatia. So, I'll be surprised if the people who end up in the semis and the men's and the women's draws are people who haven't played much at all in the past few months.
Given that pandemic, yes, we have Novak as the 1 seed, but obviously Federer and Nadal are not taking part in this. What do you make of their decisions, and Federer and Nadal, to sit this one out? And I know on the women's side as well, there were some high-ranked players that bowed out as well.
Yeah, I mean, on the women's side, I think 6 of the top 10 women in the world aren't here in New York, Bryan. Ash Barty, the world number 1, Simona Halep, number 2, Bianca Andreescu, who's Canadian, and the defending champ, isn't here. So in some ways that should theoretically make it easier for someone like Serena, although the women's draw is still wide open. There's still a whole bunch of, former Grand Slam champions in the women's draw, Angie Kerber, Sloane Stephens, Serena, Sophia Kenin, a lot of good women's players still in it. On the men's side, it is definitely weird. It's the first time since 1999, Bryan, there's been a major tournament without Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal.
Wow.
That was a U.S. Open in 99, won by Andre Agassi. So that's, more than 20 years ago. They've asked a bunch of the players about it. Sasha Zverev, the number 5 seed, said, look, sooner or later, both those guys are going to be retired, and we're going to be playing every tournament, without them. So I think it does take away, obviously, from the star power of the U.S. Open when you don't have Nadal's the defending champ. Bianca was the defending champ. I think it's the first time since 2003 that both men's and women's, defending champions aren't there. But that said, there's still a lot of great players, and certainly on the women's side. And, look, Novak is a huge favorite. He's chasing history. He's trying to get his 18th major, which would bring him 1 behind Rafa and 2 behind Roger. And I think, it seems almost inevitable he's going to pass both guys and end up with 24, 25 majors.
Adam Zagoria is with us. He's got some great work on Forbes. I've been checking out a lot of tennis stuff. Go check that out. Also, zagsblog.com. He's on Twitter at Adam Zagoria. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. Adam, my final question for you. We've seen the way the NBA has engineered this bubble, and one of the biggest debates going into it was, does this mean the team that comes out of it is going to have a big footnote to winning the title? There's been an argument now that it's even harder to win it this year because of all of the complications that have come provided by the pandemic and just the awkward setting of the bubble, and how there should not be any look of it as being a tainted title. Do you feel that in the tennis realm, despite the fact there are significant names that are not taking place or taking part, I should say, in the field at the U.S. Open, that we will go back years from now at this U.S. Open and say, you know what, they won it fair and square. There was no compromising to that win.
Yeah, that is a great question, Bryan. There has been a lot of talk about the so-called asterisk Open. Chris Clary did a great story in the New York Times on it. And, long story short, I don't think there should be an asterisk. I think, like people say with this NBA playoffs, it's almost like whichever team wins it, it's almost will have been harder in some ways.
Exactly. Yeah.
Than a regular playoff situation, because you don't have the home court, you don't have fans, you don't have the home court advantage. You're staying in a freaking bubble for 4 months.
Yeah, you don't have your family, more or less. Yeah,
just in a hotel. So there's a lot of factors there, and I think the same applies in a lot of ways to tennis. What's interesting is most of these players are sort of forced to stay at the Marriott Hotel by the airport. Novak and Serena, because they have the resources, rented these presumably luxurious, huge houses on Long Island where they get time to go outside and hang out in their backyard and get some nature. They have to pay for the security around their house so that they don't go out and, risk getting COVID.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But Novak talked about how it's well worth it because he's not, and if you're in a hotel, you have to stay in your hotel room or in the confines of the hotel all day for 2 weeks. That's rough. He's paid for a house. He's able to go outside and spend time in the yard, whatever. So, that's just another factor in Novak's favor, in addition to the fact that he's in such great shape and he stretches and everything. And, just on the asterisk thing, I mean, there were a lot of Australian Opens where like McEnroe and Borg and Connors and those guys never went. Martina Navratilova talked about how she and Chrissy would often skip the Australian or the French Open. So it's like, you don't put an asterisk on those French Opens and Australian Opens.
It's
and
fascinating.
Then just last, I know you didn't ask this question, but, I think we should just mention, Bryan, the whole, social protesting and boycotting factors that have gone on at this U.S. Open. Naomi Osaka took a stand last week at the Western and Southern Open. She boycotted her semifinal there after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Then she went back and she basically forced the tournament to pause that Thursday, not play any matches. And then, this week she's been wearing a different mask each match for honoring a slain African-American, victim of the police. She says she has 7 masks, and, if she gets to the final, she'll wear all 7. Tiafoe, you mentioned before, he's been wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. So it's interesting to see how the protests and the boycotts have spread to the tennis world, and how someone like Naomi, who's traditionally been very sort of soft-spoken and quiet and considered herself a follower, has taken the lead on this.
Well, that's interesting because I read that article that I think you were doing with Forbes, where you described the social justice movement initiatives that Naomi was doing. And yeah, her personality does not lend itself to taking a stand, which makes it even more prominent and powerful from her end to do this. Because like you'd said in the article that I urge everybody to check out on Forbes and all of your tennis content, is that she likes to kind of, as much as she's in the limelight, in tennis, yes, but beyond that, it's not really her MO. That's not really her thing. But again, it just shows you how compelled and how moved and triggered she was by these latest things that have been happening in this country, where even despite that, she has the gall and the verve to do these very powerful initiatives and statements to send a message. And I love the way the tennis community is embracing it. And every sport seemingly is, more or less. I know some sports are doing it more than others, but the fact that it is being out there and it is being discussed is super important. Adam Zagoria is super important in sports media in New York City. New York Times, does NJ, news.com, or am I saying that right?
It's NJ.com, yeah.
NJ.com. You've got Forbes, zagsblog.com, ton of other entities and publications. The guy breaks it down like no other. And I love the work of your buddy Jacob as well. He does great work in recruiting and in college hoops. You guys make a great team.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys make a great team. So I encourage everybody to check out your work. Adam, I'm Bryan. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Bryan. Anytime. Enjoy the tennis.